One of the theologically challenging aspects of the whole Exodus is the role of Paro. We understand if God wanted to remove the Jews from Egypt, he could simply have willed it. God could have decided that one day the Jews are in Egypt and the next day they stand at Sinai, or for that matter, the next day they stand in the land of Israel. Nonetheless, leaving of Egypt seems to be a process, and a deliberate process. This process clearly will have benefits for the Jews, who perhaps need to go through some type of growth. It would be something which would be incredibly challenging to go from one moment being slaves to the very next moment standing as free people at Sinai. And there seems to be a process they need to go through. The Egyptians themselves need to go through something, and apparently Paro needs to have his experiences as well. When we gather all these things together, we have, at least on a superficial level, we have what we call the Exodus. But something which causes a challenge, and this goes all the way back to the time of the rabbis and the time of the Talmud, Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish discussed this point. If Paro were to lose his free will, how can he subsequently be punished for what he did? Let's go back to try to understand this question. One of the very basic elements of humanity, of existence, is free will. Free will is a gift which God gives us. If we didn't have free will, our existence would be completely different. And we can argue that without free will, without free choice, our existence would be absurd. Because if all that we were somehow machines or angels, however you want to call it, who receive directives from God and have no choice but following those directives, then life would be absurd. So one of the greatest gifts that God gives us is free choice. The issue, however, may be, and this is the way the Rambam approaches this, is that at some point we can misuse our free will to the extent that God can then say, I'm removing your free will. Your free will is a gift. You've misused that gift. I'm taking it away. I mean, sometimes I like to think, and this is actually a very difficult topic, because one considers the Holocaust in general, Hitler in particular, that God gave such a person free will, and part of the response is going to be that the price that we pay for free will, for other people's free will and for our own free will, is at times people will really misuse that free will and cause harm and damage to others. But the thought that always goes through my mind is that Hitler, what it seems like is, I don't know if you want to call it insanity or something else, at some point makes this decision that he's going to attack Russia in the winter. Now that's absurd. Napoleon could have told him that was absurd, or at least at some point Napoleon could have. It seems to me sometimes that perhaps God was saying that Hitler's free will was taken away. And at that point he did something which is absurd, and that is the beginning of the end. Because of course what he should have done is he should have stayed together with Russia until he would have captured everything else, and then perhaps turned on them. But perhaps that was like Paro. At one moment he loses his free will, and that's it. There's a deeper point which I think if one looks carefully in the Sforno, one will see. And that is, when we imagine that God took away Paro's free will, we may be mistaken, and I need to explain this. Clearly it says in the text that God says, I'll harden his heart. Sometimes it talks about God hardening his heart, and sometimes it talks about Paro hardening his heart. The point the Sforno makes is that Paro sinned. Paro deserved punishment. Had Paro simply bowed his head after the first time he has some discomfort, he would not have received the punishment which was really coming to him. In fact, if you think about it, and one needs to be careful, and the text goes all the way back to the point, when God says, tell Paro that Israel's my firstborn, and if you do something to my firstborn, I can do something to your firstborn. And I just want to extend this thought. Paro did things to God's firstborn. He did something to the Jews. As a matter of fact, he took the Jewish babies and threw them in the water, and that was never part of the plan. They were supposed to be enslaved, but no one said anything about being murdered in the water. So perhaps Paro's heart needed to be hardened in order that he receives the punishment which is coming to him. But here's where it gets a little bit more interesting. Paro wanted to harden his heart. Paro wanted to withstand God. Paro did not want to release the Jews, which means the hardening of the heart was not to cause Paro to do something that he didn't want to do. It was to cause and allow Paro to do that which he wanted to do. So if that's the case, then to a certain extent, the theological question falls away. It's not like God took away his will from doing what he wanted to do, quite the opposite. God took away his ability to choose in order to avoid doing what he wanted to do, because what really took away the free will was the plagues. When you're struck with these plagues of biblical proportions, you no longer have free will. It was the plagues that removed the free will and the hardening of the heart which returned the free will. And the truth is, all of this may exist somewhere in a metaphor in this whole story. When the tanin is turned into a staff, into a piece of wood. The tanin, of course, represents Egypt, and the staff is the staff of the shepherd, staff of Moses, of Moshe. And perhaps in that very first sign that God gives to Paro, be careful, because the symbol of Egypt, the tanin, the crocodile, can turn into a piece of wood, and that piece of wood will be in the hand of Moshe or the hand of Aaron. And at that point, Paro no longer will have the free choice that he thought he once had.